As you can see, each of our companies carry with them an ethos of artivism. We feel it is our responsibility to be a platform for positive transformation in our community and our world, whether that's on the stage, on the page, or in critical forums like these. So thank you so much for joining us. And we are so honored to have our 4 guests today. Diane Ragsdale, who's Managing Director of Innercity Community Development Corporation and a huge advocate for South Dallas, former council member as well. Ms. Sandy Rollins, who's Executive Director of Texas Tenants Union, who's doing some amazing things here in our state. Demetria McCain, Esquire, who's President of the Inclusive Communities Project, who's doing a lot of important work that you'll hear about shortly. And Reverend Dr. George Mason, who's founder and president of Faith Commons and senior pastor of Wilshire Baptist Church. Thank you all so much for joining us. And today we are going to talk to our guests about a new vision for our city, a new vision as it relates to housing specifically and public safety. And I'm intentionally would like to use new terminology instead of public safety, as we are asking everyone to reimagine how we go about things in our community. So instead of public safety, for the rest of the evening, let's use the word safe public. That's a recommendation from one of our dear friends and another wonderful activist here in our city, 𝘗𝘪𝘳𝘦𝘐𝑬𝑃. So we're gonna look at those 2 things tonight. We are gonna talk about the power in reimagining our community and using terminology, creating new policies to benefit all of our citizens. So at this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Sada Cardona, Executive Director of Teatro Dallas.
Good evening, everyone. So I'd like this question to be for each of you, but we'll begin with the Honorable Diane Ragsdale. How does the issue of housing fit into the conversation around defunding the police and reimagining public safety, or again, a safe public?
Well, first and foremost, housing is a fundamental need. We should all enjoy a decent standard of living, and we simply cannot do that without affordable housing. This city has a trust fund that might be funded at $3 or $4 million, a housing trust fund. What we need is at least $100 million in that given trust fund. We need to defund, I completely concur, we need to defund the police budget or the public safety budget and invest into invest into human needs. And so in one of those needs is clearly affordable housing. And so we need a trust fund that would at the very least put in it or would have at least $100 million to address the issues of housing within this city. Just briefly, real quickly, the city of Dallas says that it should have at least 20,000 units, or be in need of 20,000 units by next year. It started in 2018, but clearly we don't have the money to even begin to think about that goal. And so we need at least $100 million into the Housing Trust Fund.
Thank you. Same question for Sandy Rollins. Do you want me to restate it? The question is, how does housing fit into the conversation around defunding the DPD and reimagining a safer public?
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree that there needs to be more focus on housing. You can't be safe if you don't have an affordable place to live. You can't be safe if you're living on the streets. You can't be safe if you're in a place that has raw sewage coming up in your bathtub every time you flush your toilet, or air conditioning that goes out for weeks on end when we're in triple-digit heat in the summertime, or an apartment manager who can evict you for little or no reason, you know, especially at the end of the term of the contract, when you live in a city where the city government has prioritized new development for people at much higher incomes than currently live in that neighborhood and are at risk of displacement. So all of these things, I think, send a message to people that your life doesn't matter. And the priority should be around these kinds of issues that are of daily importance in people's lives in order to have any kind of quality of life and have a safe environment in which to live.
Demetria, would you like to add anything to the comments that have been made?
Sure. I totally agree with what both of them have said already. But on this issue of feeling safe, and we're not just talking about physical safety, I think mental health is also part of it. You know, it's really, I think it was timely that yesterday Texas A&M released a study that was done that showed that white officers fire their guns 5 times more likely to fire their guns in a Black neighborhood than they are in a white or racially mixed neighborhood. And so this concept or thought process of whether or not someone feels safe when they're in their home has a lot to do with location, and to the extent that people have choices of the locations where they live. So that's something that I think I would add to the mix, and I totally agree with what the previous speaker stated.
And Pastor Mason, would you like to contribute or have any comments on this?
Sure. I think we have to begin with the matter of why these communities are in fact disadvantaged. And they are not simply so, they are not simply places where the police are patrolling because people have chosen to be in those communities and to commit crime or to endanger the lives of other people. They are there because Dallas has deliberately made choices across decades to advantage some neighborhoods and disadvantage others. This goes back to the New Deal and to 1937 and to redlining certain neighborhoods in Dallas, Texas, where we said that it was dangerous to invest on an equal basis in Black neighborhoods. And so money was not allocated, it was mortgages were not given or granted, and city services and decisions about highways. Neighborhoods in Dallas that have traditionally been now crime infested places, or places where police have focused their attention, are there because we deliberately created them, not because people have chosen by their character or by their hopelessness or whatever. It is a product of decisions that we have made over time. We can make other decisions. And the only way we're going to be able to make those decisions is by reprioritizing what kind of city we want to be. And right now, when 60% of the public of the city budget is dedicated to public safety, that has to shift in order for us to create opportunities for hope and to change these communities.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your responses. For my question, this is also for everyone. If I may, I'd like to start with Demetria. And at this moment, we are all being asked to imagine a society and a world that we have not seen but hope to be. In your opinion, what are key policies needed in reimagining housing and a safe public in our city?
Wow, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to do. And I'm gonna be honest with you and the audience. Some of us on this call have been working on what can be done for a long time. It's just that the people in control won't do it. So, for instance, there are a lot of policies that have been put forward that can actually help in this situation, right? We talked about the financial side of it, but you know, when you are a city leader and you target your quote unquote affordable housing to people who are 80% or above area median income, you're not targeting that affordable housing for people who work at coffee shops, for people who are substitute teachers or healthcare aides or home care aides. So we've got policies on the books that have not had the money put behind it and have not had the programming put behind it, right? So there's a two-part thing. There's the funding, but then you need the program. And sometimes we have the program, but they won't put the funding. So it's just like this crazy situation that we're in. We've got like inclusionary zoning policies that in my opinion, I don't think they've been put forth enough and put to the developers enough. We've got TIF districts where the TIF district apartment complex owners are supposed to put aside some units for low-income people. How much accountability goes into that? Is that really happening? In my opinion, it is not. We have got to have our city and our county go down to Austin and tell those state legislators to repeal the ban on not allowing local counties and cities to put forth housing voucher discrimination ordinances. There's a whole list of things. There's the money side, there's the policy and program side. We've got to do both. There's a whole laundry list of stuff that can be done.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pose the same question to Sandy. What key policies do you feel are needed so that we can reimagine housing and a safe public for our city?
Okay, so there's a laundry list, and I'll try to hit on a few of them, but at the federal, state, and local level. So let me go ahead and start with local a little bit. And in terms of fairness in spending, as Demetria, talked about somewhat, the city has invested in housing. There's money that went in for this, the comprehensive or so-called comprehensive housing policy that the city passed a couple of years ago, but they did prioritize people at the higher income levels. And they determined through this market value analysis they paid, I'm not sure how much for, that there were 20,000 units. And that's, I'd say, an understatement. There's over 40,000 evictions filed in Dallas County last year. And I know this year it's going to be much, much higher because of this pandemic. There's a group called BC Workshops that came out with a housing study a couple of years ago, finding that there were 68,000 households in Dallas that could afford to pay no more than $400 a month in their housing costs. But meanwhile, the comprehensive housing plan prioritized units that would cost like, $2,500 a month. One person making 120% of the area median income makes almost $70,000 a year. And there are housing options for people at those income levels. You've seen the cranes out there. You've seen the affordable housing disappearing in communities like Oak Lawn and Oak Cliff and West Dallas and East Dallas. So people have been pushed out of communities where the older, more affordable housing stock was, while the city is investing through the tax increment financing program as well in putting up new units with this pretend affordable housing set aside. The TIF district apartments can be rented to people at 80% of the area median income. But when you do that math, that's an above market or market rent in almost every single zip code in this town. So they can satisfy that affordable housing unit with an efficiency apartment that costs more than $1,100 a month and say they're providing affordable housing. Meanwhile, a minimum wage worker doesn't even qualify to live there. I mean, almost every landlord is going to want you to make 3 times the rent. And an elderly person on Social Security, the average Social Security check is less than $1,500 a month. They're being priced out completely of the market. We know lots of people who are struggling just to stay in housing. I know a lot of people that have been completely priced out of housing. They're staying in motels. They're doubled up with family. They've got evictions on their record. A motel doesn't have screening criteria, so you can maybe move from your apartment into a motel. But this is not a good way to run a city. This is not where we need policies in place so that everyone has a decent, affordable place to live, so that everyone has an opportunity to stay in the neighborhood where or move to the neighborhood where they want to live, so that there's an opportunity for home ownership. I mean, if we're subsidizing rentals at $2,500 a month, that makes no sense. I mean, you can pay a decent mortgage for that amount. So, you know, money that goes into programs, into housing subsidies where, you know, people don't have to rely on a food bank, where people don't have to juggle, do I pay the electric company or the water bill? Is what I'd like to see in this city. And I guess I focused on local. There's a lot of things that the state legislature needs to do, and maybe I'll get an opportunity a little bit later. And certainly the federal government. There's a fundamental unfairness in federal housing policy that's rooted in institutional racism that started from the founding of the country and continues today.
Thank you very much for that. And so I'd like to then turn the question to Ms. Ragsdale. What policies do you believe are needed so that we can reimagine housing and so that we can reimagine a safe public for our city?
Well, first of all, I want to say, and I just want to emphasize or reemphasize what has been stated. If you don't mind, to go back to that original question, because the housing policy, as Demetria and Sandy was talking about, the housing policy penalizes neighborhoods, penalizes the very neighborhoods that have been neglected over the years, because it focuses on incomes 80% or above, or it focuses on high opportunity areas. And so when you have a housing policy that penalizes neighborhoods that have been neglected, or penalizes people who live in Southern Dallas for the most part, then what happens is that you are contributing to the destruction of those neighborhoods and therefore open up the door for gentrification. And so that's exactly what's happening with this housing policy. They're penalizing where I live, South Dallas property, penalizing Oak Cliff, etc. And so because we want to direct our monies to those who are 80% or over, or should I say high opportunity areas of people making greater income. So that is not that is not the way that is not fair and just, and it just opens up the door for gentrification. And so we do need some additional housing policies to address that. And that's why even if we have the $100 million trust fund, we would still have to struggle with, as Demetria indicated, to make sure that we have a housing policy that is equitable and fair. And so anyway, so I feel that one of the ways that we can address, once going back to this public safety issue, we got to move forward. Our young people are moving us forward to something very progressive, sister. Thank you. And that is that we got to once again divest from the public safety, from the police department, and reinvest into the human needs of people, and one of which is housing. Housing creates stability around which everything else revolves, and so you've got to start. That academic research is very clear about what housing can do to not only provide a decent standard of living, but also what it can do to provide stability and what it can do to provide security. And so anyway, I just want to make sure that that we understand that from a public health standpoint, as well as it has been stated, housing is directly connected to public health. Housing is directly connected to my health, my physical health and mental health, as well as is connected to even the reduction in the need for police, if indeed I have a stable environment in which to live, because housing is the anchor around which everything else revolves. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. And so let's but not least, I'd like to ask that same question of Pastor Mason, and kind of reimagining or envisioning something that we have yet to be. What policies do you believe are necessary in order to reimagine housing and a safe public for our city?
Policies can't be implemented. They can't even be agreed upon until people decide what kind of communities they want, what kind of city they want. We can have grand ideas about how we want to build up certain communities and invest in them. But if you get around the horseshoe and sooner or later, the proposal is going to ultimately cost you money, or it's going to cost you property value, so it's going to reduce your wealth or your privilege, what we find is over and over and over again, those policies can't be approved or can't be implemented, or there are ways of thwarting them. This is true at the very basic level, for example, of how we deal with homelessness to begin with. I mean, we can't get every district in Dallas to agree that they should share in the task of welcoming suitable housing for the homeless. We can't get every district in Dallas to agree that they have a stake in affordable housing. And the reason for that is every single time that imposes upon my neighborhood, we get NIMBYism that grows up. That is not in my backyard. It's a wonderful idea for someone else to do that. But what that really means is that we have a city where the people with the most wealth and privilege are going to resist any attempt to share their life with people who are at lower levels of economic life. And as long as we're going to ghettoize ourselves in richer neighborhoods, now I'm not talking about poor neighborhoods, I'm talking about choosing to live in richer neighborhoods and creating invisible gated communities that prevent other people from sharing our life. Well, we're going to have a city that continues to be, as Dallas, Texas is, the single most inequitable city for at racial and socioeconomic level in the United States. We have to decide, is that really what we want?
Thank you so much for that answer. I'd like to pose a question. This is Anika to Demetria. Starting at the local level.
Hello? Something just
Hi,
happened.
can you see me? Okay, starting
Yeah,
at the local
sounds
level,
weird.
what specific steps must be taken to enforce existing policies, and how can we hold our elected and appointed officials accountable?
So the way the system is now, you practically need to be available during business hours, 9 to 5, with no job to follow everything, which is unfortunate. A lot of things happen during the daytime. It'd be great if it happened in the evening or at a time that most people can participate. So first of all, because you really need to be a watchdog on these kind of things. Regarding the statements made by the pastor earlier, I mean, there really is this silent agreement, I think, between city council people and representatives of predominantly white neighborhoods and those of neighborhoods that are Black and brown, this like silent agreement, right? So like in the predominantly white neighborhoods, they like, we don't want any of that affordable housing, so I'm gonna vote for whichever you want, right? And our Black and brown representatives hoard all of the opportunities for affordable housing, and nothing gets built within the city of Dallas much beyond where we always see it get built, right? So that's one issue that we've got to pay attention to and hold our elected leaders to task. They have all of these little task forces that they created not long ago to follow housing policy issues. I think it's really, in my opinion, a way to keep us all too busy from focusing on the main thing. But the public is invited to participate in those task force meetings. They haven't held any in a while. but the public is invited to participate in that to see what's going on. Anytime you see some developer come in wanting some favor from the city, then we've got to demand that that developer, that real estate developer, give something to the city. Make sure they're making sure that they're going to put some affordable units out there and available, not just in one little neighborhood, not just pay some little fee somewhere, but actually build units that are needed for our lower income folks. The accountability part really requires constant watching. It really requires constant watching. And this issue of equity, you know, we saw in the bond package not long ago, city council decided to equally divide up some money for every district. Well, every district doesn't need the same amount of money to come to a level of where they need to be so that the people live there have the opportunities that they need. Perfect example is the city's running around on the Shingle Mountain thing in court. Well, you know what? Be creative, find some money. Pay some money to remove that pile, a heap of recycled shingles from Miss Jackson's neighborhood so those folks can live in harmony and peace in the housing that they've already paid for. Okay, I'll let somebody else speak because I can go on forever.
Thank you. Hello, thank you, Demetria. I want to circle back to, for just a moment, back to Sandy. She had made some very important remarks about evictions. And so the question, you know, there are tens of thousands of evictions every year that destabilize communities and families, and you alluded to that, or you talked about that a little bit. And it results in stress for the community. Could you talk a little bit about what the actual role of the police plays in evictions and what some of the solutions are to that particular role that DPD has in terms of evictions, and anything else you might want to add about, you know, restructuring policies around evictions?
Well, evictions are not the responsibility of the police department. The eviction process goes through the Justice of the Peace Court and the constable's office. So it's Dallas County constables that deliver the notices to appear in court. It's Dallas County constables who stand by if a landlord is going to set somebody out. So DPD doesn't really have a role in that process. I guess though the indirect role is if you know, almost every dollar or, you know, is going into policing versus going into other needs in the city, then they're taking money that could be used for affordable housing. So when the city of Dallas passed their housing policy a couple years ago, I'm not going to touch on every recommendation we made, but we made a number of recommendations to try to address the issues so that people aren't paying 50 or 60 or 70 or more percent of their income towards the rent and struggling to stay housed, and having, with almost every dollar going to their landlord with very little left over for food and medicine and other basic needs. Some of those they could create a tax credit program, their own tax credit program, to create more affordable units. They could require real affordable housing set-asides when they give developers money that are not only taking away existing affordable units, but putting up this unaffordable stock that nobody in the community can afford to live in. They could establish a right of first purchase. So if a property were for sale, there's some anti-displacement measures. The Washington D.C. has something called the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. So if a property is for sale, the tenant would have the right of first purchase. It's done at a multifamily level in D.C. With support from the city for technical assistance and financial assistance. There was a bill introduced a couple of times in the Texas legislature by State Senator Royce West that would have had that apply to single family homes and duplexes. So as the developers are grabbing up land in South Dallas and West Dallas and other communities and pricing people out, you know, the person living in that house might have the first opportunity to get it and you know, stay in their home and community if they want it. So those are just a few of the ideas that we passed on to the city. But in terms of eviction, I mean, it does have devastating consequences, and Diane Ragsdale discussed some of them, but school performance is definitely tied into this. So if we want to, you know, you know, there are civic leaders and, you know, corporate leaders that pretend to care about poverty and they pretend to care about education. But if you don't put basic protections in to keep people from being displaced through no fault of their own, then you really don't care. You don't care enough if you're not going to have equity in society. So, I don't, you know, and I can go on in terms of Texas tenant landlord law. I mean, there's a lot that could be done at the legislative Texas legislature. You know, Texas has very, very landlord friendly laws when it comes to eviction. So for instance, we've got right now fortunately, at the city of Dallas, a temporary opportunity to cure ordinance due to COVID-19. Very, very grateful for that. But that's something that is standard almost every place else in the country, just in non-pandemic times. In Texas, a tenant can be given, almost every tenant signs away their right to a 3-day notice to vacate and can be given a 24-hour notice to vacate with no opportunity to pay the late rent. And almost everybody who signs that Texas Apartment Association lease, again, it's a 24-hour notice to vacate. They don't have to accept it late. I mean, they can if they want to, but they're not required to. And so it's a very swift process. There's no counterclaims in eviction cases. There's no rent withholding, regardless of how bad the conditions are. You know, there's no just cause eviction protections. You know, these are all things that would help stabilize housing and tell people your life does matter. And that we care about you, we care about your children, we care about having stable communities and for you to have stable housing. But none of that is in place in Dallas or in Texas.
And I have a question for Diane, Ms. Ragsdale, and I apologize, I didn't introduce myself. I'm 𝘗𝘰𝘴𝑪 Johnson. I'm the board chair for Bishop Arts Theater Center. And Ms. Ragsdale, your organization, ICDC, has made strides in South Dallas over the last decade. However, many are fearing and witnessing gentrification kind of creeping in on the edges of this historically underfunded community. What kind of policies can be put in place to protect current residents and business owners from displacement? Ms. Ragsdale, you're on mute.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
We can hear you.
So part of this money can be used for strategic land banking, whereby community-based nonprofits, community-based groups that own the land can indeed protect people against gentrification. But the other thing, though, is this: I am convinced that community organizing is critical in everything. And so we have to organize to deliver a hostile message. We have to organize to create a hostile environment that delivers the message that gentrification will simply cannot take place. And so it works. It's proven to work in other parts of the city, in other parts of the country. So we policy is important, but when it comes to gentrification, one of the key roles, in my opinion, is community organizer to create a hostile environment which conveys the message that certain things will not be tolerated, and one of which is displacement. The other thing, though, is the CLTs, Community Land Trust. And it was passed recently in the city of Dallas. It has been passed in Austin for years. The Community Land Trust is where a nonprofit might build a house, but the land is owned by the nonprofit in order to minimize the displacement or the elevation of property values. When the property values increase, the taxes increase. And so one thing that can happen is indeed to create community land trusts whereby the land is commonly owned, is common ground, if you will, and the houses happen to be owned by the homeowner. And then the other thing, of course, is tax exemption. There ought to be some areas throughout this city whereby we are exempt from taxes, and so that helps. Once again, when the property value goes up, the taxes go up. But indeed, there should be an exemption of taxes for designated neighborhoods and designated areas. Anyway, and let me just say this, because once again, this city is just destroying inner city neighborhoods because of their public policy. And when that happens, then you create the opportunity for gentrification. But also when you deny, not only dealing with 80% or above, providing monies for people of higher income, but the other thing is that, we have individuals within our neighborhoods who simply cannot afford home repair. And so we need more money, not just for home repair, but also to help our seniors and our disabled and our working poor to indeed complete that paperwork, walk through the system in order to receive the home repair, because even that in itself can lead to gentrification when you have people living in homes that are in significant disrepair. Thank you.
Ms. Ragsdale, this is David Lozano. I'm the director of 𝘗𝘪𝘳𝘬𝘓 Theater Company. You said something that I thought that really grabbed my attention. You talked about creating a hostile environment to protect our neighborhoods from being gentrified. And
so community organizing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, community organizing. Now, do you think that approach applies to this movement of divesting in the police and demanding reinvestment in our neighborhoods? Do we need to create hostile community organizing to achieve this?
Yes, it would be extremely helpful. It would be in line with making sure that our communities are protected and improved. So we're not only divesting. It means one thing to divest and then reinvest, or divest and invest, but you cannot necessarily invest into that which does not exist. And so, yes, indeed, organize this effort, the effort that is taking place now, the community organizing effort that is taking place now. If it also helped and applied to gentrification, that could be very helpful to in essence, to prevent displacement. Yes, community organizer to create a hostile environment to deliver a message that displacement will not be tolerated is something that the existing movement can help us with. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a question for Demetria.
I'm here.
Your work with the Inclusive Communities Project is specifically dedicated to ensuring fair and affordable housing opportunities for low-income families in our community. Can you tell us what your biggest hurdle has been in this important work, and maybe even the biggest opportunity?
So let me, if I may, take the opportunity to actually finish out that last thought that Ms. Ragsdale had. I think the community organizing piece is crucial. A perfect example is when Texas Tenants Union got together and made sure that the residents of Little Mexico, which is public housing in the heart of downtown Dallas, knew that the Dallas Housing Authority was going through a procedural step that could eventually end up selling, Little Mexico off to a private owner, despite the fact that it's been public housing for years and also has a historic context to it. The Dallas Housing Authority's board meeting was standing room only. The directors of that board, who were appointed by the mayor, said they had never seen a meeting so packed. Well, guess what? They never seen a meeting so packed, but because they had never reached out to the actual public housing tenants the way Sandy did. And so at the end of that particular battle, and I say battle and not the war, they did not vote to move forward with the procedural step that would have started or been given them ability to start the idea of selling Little Mexico. So I agree 100% that the organizing is super duper important. That's a battle that was won. The war is not won. So we've got to continue, because the minute we go to sleep, then things happen, people get displaced. So now the biggest hurdle, to your question, the biggest hurdle right now, our organization does counseling for voucher holders who have vouchers through the Dallas Housing Authority. Now let's be clear, the city of Dallas loves to punt anything that has to do with affordable housing to the Dallas Housing Authority, but the Dallas Housing Authority can't handle it all. The city's got to put in some more heft and money into this issue of affordable housing for low-income people. So only one, this is a national figure that everybody across the country realizes, only 1 in 4 people who qualify and want a housing choice voucher, Section 8 voucher, some people call it, actually get it. So you've got just that many more people who don't even get it. But we do work with families who get it and actually want to move out of the areas where they have historically been steered to live. It's just simply their choice. And I think we as Black and brown people should be able to have the choice to live wherever we want. And that's how our families who decide to work with us feel that they should have that choice. However, policies stop that choice, right? And so I kind of mentioned earlier the idea of voucher discrimination. A landlord can say, oh, you look perfect on paper, I like you, I have a unit for you. Oh, wait, you have subsidized rent and you want me to get some of my money from the housing authority? No, I'm not gonna rent to you because you're a Section 8 voucher holder. In other parts of the country, that's illegal. In Dallas, that's okay. In the state of Texas, that's okay, because we have this state law that preempts cities and counties from being able to pass laws that protect families like the families that ICP helps. That's huge. But this issue also of displacement is huge too. When we take a look at 10th Street, we helped 10th Street in some of their advocacy efforts, and we've been, working with them for a couple of years. That area is going through a lot of change right now, and that's a perfect example of what displacement by way of gentrification can look like. The city, through this ordinance that they can very well tomorrow on the books get rid of, has been allowing tear downs in this historic Freedmanstown left and right. It's happening in 10th Street, it could happen somewhere else. But 10th Street is not getting the protection they need from the city of Dallas. And with the stroke of a vote and a pen, that could change immediately. There's litigation right now by way of the 10th Street residents, but we don't have to wait for litigation. The city can just do the right thing.
Thank you. And so my question is to Sandy. Once again, I'm 𝘗𝘧𝘐 Johnson, the board chair for Bishop Arts Theater Center. Sandy, the Texas Tenants Union is a powerful force within our community and a true example of successful organizing among those who are oppressed, serving to amplify those voices. What are some key steps other constituencies might borrow in developing their own machine for positive transformation?
Well, I agree. I mean, community organizing is essential, and I appreciate the remarks you just made. I'm not sure that we've done everything that needs to be done. I know that when we have the capacity to help with community organizing, we can see the results. We can see that it makes a difference. I'm still, trying to transition from nonstop COVID stuff to and not having in-person meetings anymore, not being able to door knock, not being able to have in-person community meetings, and how to most effectively do it when we can't have person-to-person contact safely. But it's essential that it be done, and we'll get there at some point or another. Another example of where it worked to a great extent, not completely, and again, but was in West Dallas with the 𝘗𝘪𝘳𝘬𝘮 tenants a couple years ago, and our organization worked with the Texas Organizing Project to help those tenants fight back against a landlord who was telling 305 families for months on end, you need to go. And it started with a 30-day notice. You need to go. I'm not going to rent to you anymore. And through that effort, a number of people were able to remain and actually purchase their housing. And then, although with really shoddy agreements, that now Legal Aid of Northwest Texas has reached a settlement and a lawsuit to provide some stability for those tenants. The people in the streets, I'm glad they're there. I'm concerned about COVID and safety with that, but I think the pressure that has been put on since the murder of George Floyd and helping to redirect, the priorities for what is a safe community has been essential, and it does present a wonderful opportunity that hopefully we can get some of these things implemented and redirect our taxpayer dollars that we're all part of into really benefiting the taxpayers. Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully answered that, but yeah. Is there somebody else that wants to back up on on that? Are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live. Thank you, Sandy. I wanted to just point out that we have lots of questions coming in from our viewers this evening, which is great. We had a question that came in from Julie Acosta, and so I'm going to pose this to Demetria. The question is about whether there's any collective organization or an effort in the city of Dallas working on community land trust. So if you can speak to the community land trust efforts here in the city and give us your insight about that process.
Yeah, I think it was Ms. Ragsdale that brought up the community land trust, which is probably more of her expertise, but I am familiar with the way it played out, or the effort for it played out in 10th Street. I think the one thing I would add, and I think you should take this question to Ms. Ragsdale after me, is that if you're going to do a community land trust, you've got to be working with a real deal nonprofit, not just some developer posing as a nonprofit community organization. In 10th Street, the residents weren't so keen on it because it's obviously unique there because it's a former freedman's town, right? It's a freedman's town. And most of the people there already own their property and land in fee simple. But I think this question is best for Ms. Ragsdale.
Okay, so Ms. Ragsdale, could you, since you had this expertise and background, could you give us some feedback about what's going on with the community land trust? Hold on.
Unmute yourself.
I thought I had done. Okay.
You're there.
It was really done unsuccessfully in 10th, primarily because, in my opinion, it's the property owners simply did not trust the process. And this is a new concept. Oh Lord, the community land trust is a new concept. And so, and in order for it to take place, once again, it goes back to community organizing that promotes community education. And because people become very uncomfortable with the nonprofit owning the land and they only own the house. And because some of whom really want their value to appreciate. I mean, so as the property values appreciate, they want that as well. So it really takes a lot of community organizing and community education. However, though, this is not new. This is taking place throughout this country, and also successfully in Austin, Texas. It was the Community Land Trust ordinance was recently passed by the council. Well, maybe prior to the pandemic, and so there are some nonprofits that are pursuing that. That they have purchased contiguous pieces of land, joint land, and they will develop housing and maintain the ownership of the land. That is a key method to help minimize gentrification, because once again, as the property values go up, taxes go up, and that's what in essence causes the displacement. So, but we'll see if that model works. And I know that there have been some models here in the city that have been tried. It just simply was not able to take place. But it's something that should. But you need the community organizing component in order for it to be successful.
Thank you. I'd like to pose a question to Pastor Mason. Pastor Mason, how do you see your role as a faith leader in helping to dismantle systemic racism and imagine an equitable community for all of our citizens?
Thank you. I'm not sure I've got my video going here. So can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. There we go. All right. Well, all right. So first of all, let me just say how impressed I am with this group of panelists and just how much I'm learning listening to you. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing, for the ways that you're imagining a different future for our city, for the resilience of having to, just continue to be creative and to be persistent, because the systems and the bureaucracies just fight against progress in making our city more equitable. I'm just impressed with the imagination that we're talking about here. And so thank you very much for your work. From the point of view of faith leaders, I think that it's important for us to get out of the idea that we have a spiritual lane that we're supposed to stay in, that we're simply supposed to talk about how to give inner peace to people or to prepare them for the next life, and to stay out of conversations about our life together in the community. It seems to me that it's crucial for us to call on people to understand the moral character of their faith as a lived experience in the world today, and that we have an obligation to one another, and not just to ourselves and our own families, in preserving what we have and in being responsible people to keep things the way they are. But we have to be advocates for those who have been deprived of all the opportunities that some others have in this city. And that takes me to the point of this. We make decisions as a city over and over again on what seems to be a kind of fatalistic economic basis, where the market simply dictates, where values are treated across the city in the same way. Ms. Ragsdale started talking about tax-free zones and the opportunity to give relief to people in certain communities. Well, people think that that is a giveaway. But the fact of the matter is we've had giveaways going in the other direction for decades, and that has built wealth and that has deprived other people of that very kind of thing. We have deliberately made decisions, again, that have deprived some people and advantaged others. We're talking here about what is just, what is reparations. I'm going to use the R word here, reparations, restitutions for decisions that have been made across time. It's time for us not simply to say, okay, let's have a new day, let's treat everyone fairly from this point forward, when we have deliberately instead treated people unfairly. So we need to make decisions based upon what we are hearing from people in community organizing, people who live in these neighborhoods, what they need, what will make their life better, not decisions on the part of some imposed upon them. This is a time when faith needs to call us to the neighborliness that is at the root of every one of our religious traditions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pastor Mason. And for all of you all who are joining us today, I just hope that you all are feeling empowered. You're feeling informed and now empowered to do something. So there is a call to action that we are asking of everyone who's with us today. There is power in numbers and there's power in these actions. So many people are asking, what can I do? So there are a few things. And first, we'd like for you to take note of the simple action plan, which includes downloading the 10 points, the recommendations that the community has devised. And it is located in the comments section of the live stream. And then 2, create your own letter and personalize your own letter. For example, saying that you support investing in the arts and I support 𝘗𝘪𝘳𝘦𝘐𝑚𝑒𝑎 Theater or other programs or housing programs, anything other than spending 60% of our budget on policing. What are some things that you're passionate about that you can share with our mayor and the council? And then the third thing is to send those points to the mayor and all 14 council members, not just your own council members. As you all can see, in the last several weeks, we have been able to accomplish things, but our voices are being heard. So flood those in these positions of power, these positions that can conduct the transformation that the community is demanding. Flood them with your letters, flood them with your concerns and your demands, and together we can have this reality, this world that we're reimagining will be a reality. I really believe that. I have that hope. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and please stand by to hear of another forum that we'll hold later this summer, and we just look forward to being a platform in our community to bring about the change that we know we deserve, our community deserves. We can make it happen. Thank you to all of our panelists, to Demetria, Honorable Diane Ragsdale, Pastor Mason, and to Sandy. God bless you for all that you're doing. Keep up the fight, keep up the great work. And as my grandfather used to say, keep on keeping on because you're making a difference. God bless and thank you. We'll see you next time.